In this video, we're going to learn how to compare and order fractions. Before we do this, we're going to review some basic symbols. First of all, the greater than symbol looks like this. The way I remember it is that when you draw it, it kind of looks like a G. The less than symbol looks like this. Again, when you draw it, it kind of looks like an L. Okay, so G for greater than, L for less than. Now let's try to compare some fractions. As you can see, we have 3/4, a box, and then 9/12. It should be fairly obvious that we cannot compare these things because we're not looking at the same type of fraction. In the first fraction, our denominator is 4, and in the second fraction, our denominator is 12. In order to compare fractions, our denominators have to be the same. We call this a common denominator. Alright, so let's learn how we can make a common denominator. There are two ways. Either A, you can change one of your denominators into the other denominator by multiplication, or you can change one of the denominators into the other by division. Or you can even change both of them if multiplying or dividing will not easily turn one into the other. In this case, we can look and we see that we have 4 and 12. 4 can easily be changed into 12 by multiplication. How would we do this? Well, in order to change 4 into 12, we would need to multiply by 3. So let's do that. We're going to take our fraction and we're going to multiply the entire thing by 3. Now, when we multiply the whole fraction by 3, we can't just multiply the denominator. We have to also multiply the numerator by 3. So 3 times 3 is going to give us 9, and 4 times 3 is going to give us 12. So now we have 9/12, and we're comparing it to, we're just going to bring this down, we're not going to do anything to it at all, we're comparing it to 9/12. So the symbol that would go in the middle of these two fractions would clearly be the equal to symbol. Let's try another example. 29/5 compared to 6 and 2/10. The first thing you should notice is that 29/5 is an improper fraction because the numerator is greater than the denominator. 6 and 2/10 is a mixed number. So already it is very difficult to compare these two fractions. First, we're going to need to either turn them both into mixed numbers or both into improper fractions, and then we're going to have to look and see whether denominators are the same. In this case, 5 and 10 are not the same, which means that at least one of the fractions is going to have to change. Alright, so let's start off. I'm going to show you how to do this both ways. Let's start by comparing improper fractions, and then we'll compare them as mixed numbers. So in order to compare them as improper fractions, that means we're going to have to change one of the two fractions into an improper fraction. So, since 6 and 2/10 is the only mixed number, we'll change this into an improper fraction. So we can do that by multiplying our whole number by the denominator, so 6 times 10 will give us 60, and then we're going to add that to the numerator, which gives us 62. So our fraction is 62 over 10. So now we have two improper fractions, 29/5 and 62/10. So the only way we can compare them is to have the same denominator. We can either change this one into a denominator of 10 by finding an equivalent fraction, or we can change this fraction into a denominator of 5, again by finding an equivalent fraction. I'm going to change this one because I always find it easier to work with smaller numbers. So in order to turn 10 into 5, we're going to divide by 2. Now remember, whatever you do to the numerator, you have to do the same thing to the denominator. So in this case, because we're changing the denominator to, we're dividing it by 2, we also have to divide our numerator by 2. I chose the number 2 because I could clearly see that 62 was an even number, and so as an even number, it would be divisible by 2. So 62 divided by 2 is going to give us 31. So now we have 29/5, I'm just going to bring it over here, compared to 31/5. Clearly, 31 is larger than 29, so in between I'm going to write the less than sign because 29 is less than 31. Let's try the question again, but this time we're going to change 29/5 into a mixed number. To do this, let's divide 29 by 5. So 29 divided by 5. 5 does not go into 2, so we're just going to leave a placeholder there. 5 goes into 29 5 times, and 5 times 5 gives us 25. So we are left with 4. When we divide like this, the number up here on the top is going to be our whole number. So we are left with 5 wholes. And the number that is our remainder is going to be our fraction. So we're left with 4/5. And remember that our denominator does not change. Okay? But we're trying to compare this to 6/10. Still, we can't compare these numbers because our denominator is not the same. Okay, so our first step is going to our next step is going to be to make sure that our denominators are the same. So there is 2 ways you can do this. Either A, you can change 4/5 into a denominator that has 10, or you can change 2/10 into a denominator that has 5. I'm going to change 2/10 into a denominator that has 5. I'm going to carry down the 6 wholes. The 6 wholes never changes, so we don't really need to do anything with that number. But in order to change the 2/10 into a denominator that has 5 as it, we can divide by 2, because 10 divided by 2 gives us 5, and then our numerator also needs to be divided by 2. That will give us 1. So now we can compare. We have 5 and 4/5 compared to 6 and 1/5. And clearly 5 and 4/5 is going to be less than 6 and 1/5. Now if you noticed, the whole number didn't change, so really we didn't have to change the fraction part of this because 5 was already less than 6. However, it's always good practice to make sure that you're comparing fractions with the same denominator. Even if you already know that one is greater than the other, it's a good idea to make sure you have common denominators. Our final example will look at 3 different numbers. We're going to be comparing and ordering now. So in this question, let's order them from least to greatest, so the lowest to the greatest. So again, we can't compare these because they all have different denominators, and some of them are improper fractions, and one of them is a mixed number. So there are lots of different ways we can compare them. We can make sure that they all have the exact same denominator, or we can turn them into mixed numbers and see if we can compare them like that. I'm going to start off by turning them into mixed numbers. That will tell us immediately which ones are bigger based on whole numbers, and then if we have to compare the fractions, we will. So let's change 10/4 into a mixed number. So we can do that by doing 10 divided by 4. So let's do that. 10 divided by 4, and we know that 4 goes into 10 2 times, which gives us 8, and a remainder of 2. So our fraction is going to be 2 and 2/4, or 2 1/2 if we were to reduce that. Alright, so that doesn't help us too much because our next fraction was 2 1/3. We don't change this one at all. Our final number is 9/2, so we're going to again figure out what that is as a mixed number. So I'm going to do 9 divided by 2. We know that 2 goes into 9 4 times, and 4 times 2 gives us 8 with a remainder of 1. So our fraction here is going to be, or our mixed number here is going to be 4 wholes, which we get from over here. And our remainder is 1/2. So already, by looking at these 3 numbers, we can see that this is clearly the largest. So we're going to leave that in place as 4 1/2 is the largest. It's at least almost 2 times larger than at least the other ones because our whole numbers are 2. But now we need to compare these and see which one is larger. So we have 2 fourths or 2 quarters compared to 1/3. Remember, we can keep the whole numbers the same and just compare the fractions. So in order to compare them, we need the same denominator. That means we need to find a number that they both multiply or divide to give. Looking at 3 and 4, it's pretty clear because they're small numbers that they're both going to go into 12. So we can change our fractions to have a denominator of 12. But the way we do that is going to be a little bit different for each one of these numbers. And notice how I just brought down the 2 because they represent 2 wholes, so we don't need to change those at all. All right, to get from 4 to 12, we multiply our whole fraction by 3. So that means we need to also multiply 2 by 3, which is going to give us 6. In our second fraction, we had to multiply the whole thing by 4 in order to turn 3 into 12. So we're going to do 1 times 4, which is going to give us 4. Now we can compare and see we have 2 and 6/12 compared to 2 and 4/12. Well, clearly 2 and 4/12 is going to be less than 2 and 6/12. So our final order is going to be, I'll just write it down here, 2 and 4/12, that's our smallest number, 2 and 6/12, and finally 4 and 1/2. Your ticket in the door for tomorrow is going to be to order the following fractions from least to greatest.